Hey guys, welcome back to CLOWNFISH TV. This is Kneon, and we're going to dip back in on Kickstarter. We're going to talk about Kickstarter, which has had a pretty bad year, right? Kickstarter laid off 40% of its workforce, this after a large number of their employees unionized. After their profits dipped 39%. Kickstarter is not in a very good place right now, but I saw this article earlier today, and it actually came out about 2 weeks ago, and I don't think anybody else covered it, but it sounds to me like Kickstarter could be changing its entire business model in the not too distant future. If you read between the lines, it sounds like they're very non-committal about what the future of Kickstarter is. I mean, obviously it's not working out that well for them. Of course, I think a big part of it was because of their gatekeeping. A lot of people decided to no longer use Kickstarter to start crowdfunding campaigns because of the insane amount of gatekeeping that Kickstarter was doing. And, this has been going on for about 2 or 3 years now, where Kickstarter wanted to vet every project that came through, and the employees had differences of opinion. I'm just going to call that differences of opinion as to what projects should go through and which projects should not be allowed to proceed. You know, for example, Kickstarter employees thought that a comic called Always Punch Nazis was a great idea, and they actually argued with management. And that argument with management over Always Punch Nazis led to the Kickstarter union. However, when Richard Meyer from YouTube, controversial YouTuber Richard C. Meyer, when he decided to take his very PG-13 G.I. Joe style comic to Kickstarter, somebody there said no, and said, no, we shouldn't do this because we have a moral obligation to not allow people like Richard C. Meyer to make money off of Kickstarter. So he went to Indiegogo and made hundreds of thousands of dollars, and lots of other creators who felt kicked by Kickstarter also went to Indiegogo and made hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Kickstarter had to lay a bunch of people off. See how that happens? We talked about Camilla Zhang, who was the comic book outreach person over there, and she was one of the first ones to get gone, and now we don't know what's going on with Kickstarter and comics, and I don't know if they really care, because this article on the Verge makes it sound like Kickstarter is looking at potentially changing its business model. This went under the radar. They talked about how the pandemic has been strange for Kickstarter. Over the past month, the company laid off nearly 40% of its workforce as projects on the platform dropped off. So people are not using it. It's not just because of the pandemic. We're talking year over year, they saw an almost 40% decline in projects. People aren't using the platform anymore, causing a sharp decline in revenue. But now, only weeks later, Kickstarter says it reached a massive milestone, $5 billion in pledges after 11 years. As the world battles COVID, the company says backer support for projects hasn't waned, but it is seeing a smaller number of creators putting their ideas out into the world. So they talked with the CEO, I think it's Aziz Hassan, talked to him about the company's future, how it could adjust its business model, and the potential future of crowdfunding. Hassan said he's committed to the core concept of crowdfunding and the tools Kickstarter has created, but looking ahead, the company needs to be more stable and innovate. He suggests Kickstarter might look to play a bigger role in the entire creative process, not just launching a ready-to-ship product. Will we be only a crowdfunding platform forever, he asks. Hard to say, but I don't think so. But I think there's so much support that creative work needs to make sure that it's actually realized, and that's a sweet spot for us. Well, if they don't get their revenue up somehow, it's not going to matter, is it? Because they're not going to have money to do anything. You know, he's talking about some of these successful projects they had, like Critical Role on Kickstarter. You know, again, they have had some successful projects. Nobody's saying they haven't. Todd McFarlane's Spawn toy / comic book did over 2 million, but those success stories are getting further and further between, fewer and farther between. A lot of the action, at least in comics, is over on Indiegogo, where it's not unusual now to see hundreds of thousands of dollars, 6-figure comic book campaigns, and that's something that you don't see very often on Kickstarter anymore. You did at the beginning, but you don't see it very much these days. What kinds of projects have been the most popular recently? And are you seeing any change in what kinds of projects show up during the pandemic? We've seen a lot of games, comics and illustration, and design and tech projects. So they got rid of Camilla Zhang because she helped start the union, I'm telling you. And they also are looking at her as part of the reason why everybody went to competitor Indiegogo. They talk about Drip, which was a Patreon competitor that Kickstarter had, and they pulled the rug out from underneath people on that one. They just like ended it. I didn't even know they had it. But this leads to a bigger conversation about what the future of Kickstarter is. Kickstarter once had a subscription product called Drip, which no longer exists. I think during the pandemic, many people have begun supporting their favorite institutions and creators through recurring revenue and subscription plans, if they've got the money to do so. Looking back, do you wish you still had a subscription tool on the platform? And is it something you'd be interested in revisiting? The CEO says, the outlook on how you help creators fund their projects, I think, will remain kind of open and broad. It's hard to know right now what the future holds, but in this moment, in the next few months, there's a place for project-based rewards, something that we're recognizing, and we're seeing actually that they're quite resilient right now. And so our focus right now and the desire is to just really make sure that is a reliable tool in the next few months. This sounds very, very non-committal. This sounds like, yeah, we're going to do the crowdfunding thing for a couple of months, but if we can't turn this thing around, we're going to have to do something else. What we've seen historically, natural disasters, recessions, and things like that, is that creativity tends to thrive in these moments. It actually gets kind of a big boom back. And where I want us to be is that as creators and those projects return, and as more of these ideas become less of maybe a hobby or a part-time thing and become a primary vehicle of someone's expression, that we're there and we're ready for them. What do you mean by you'd be ready for them? Would you have a variety of options for how they could launch a campaign? Well, I think, yeah, with our platform now, and there's so many tools to be able to help them fund their project better, to make sure they're connecting to backers better, yada, yada, yada. I think there's ways of taking the existing format and the tool that we've created and actually just giving it even more potency. I think a couple things here. One, I think their investors, if they have investors, are probably asking questions. Two, I think it's pretty clear that Kickstarter's best days are behind them. Three, they're probably looking at Indiegogo and being like, oh, hell, we screwed up. And they talk about that. They talk about how they've got their pre-launch pages now. That's something that Indiegogo, I think, did first. And again, they keep asking questions. The Verge keeps asking questions, and the Kickstarter CEO is not answering them very well. Why is there potentially more creativity than ever, but fewer projects on Kickstarter? Because of gatekeepers. Because of gatekeepers. So when I say that, what I'm looking is to find kind of a future outlook. I think right now, while things just remain so uncertain and unstable, it's really difficult for any creator to take the leap. As you're watching a lot of creators too, they're leaning back into some basic practices of things they're doing. But as people, I think, feel the effect of quarantine of the world around them, my thought is that 10 months, 12 months out, we'll start to see people want to take a little bit more of a leap of faith on their ideas. No, I think what's going on is you have to answer to your higher ups, whether it's a board or investors or whatever, as to why you're failing miserably, and platforms like Indiegogo are on the rise. And it comes down to gatekeeping. That is a huge part of why Kickstarter is not attractive anymore. I see other opportunities on the future horizon for us to explore other ways of helping people bring projects to life, whether that's through the funding mechanism, whether that's helping them shape their idea, and whether that's helping them come and make it at the end of the day. But right now, my thought here is like the next 6 months or the rest of the year, we have to do everything we can to actually bolster the platform. Well, laying off half your staff's not going to help. They never talk about the gatekeeping. They never talk about, reasons specifically why Kickstarter has declined. And YouTubers have been pointing it out. Some publications have pointed out the gatekeeping, the union. These are things that actually hurt Kickstarter. When people realized that Kickstarter wasn't necessarily a safe place for them, and also they started looking at the dollar amounts. It was like Kickstarter was attracting a certain kind of clientele, certain kind of clientele that doesn't really like to spend money, maybe tries growing vegetables on sidewalks with cardboard underneath the 1.5 inches of dirt that they shoveled onto the sidewalk. Maybe that's the kind of clients that Kickstarter wants, but those people don't have any money. And so there, again, it's people go where the money is, and the money is on Indiegogo. So I want to talk about Patreon, because Patreon was in a very similar place a year or two ago, and they had the same thing happen. They started gatekeeping and people left. This is coming from 2019, the beginning of 2019. Patreon CEO says the company's generous business model is not sustainable as it sees rapid growth. So what they did, they're like, oh, we're being very generous and it's not sustainable, and we're going to chase enterprise level Patreon accounts now. That's how we're going to make money. We're going to go after businesses and insert ourselves as a middleman when any business that has a staff could do this themselves. But they tried that and it didn't work. So now they're trying to get back creators. If you've been to Twitter lately, you'll see, or Facebook even, you'll see ads for their new campaign, which we mocked fiercely because it's a lie. They talked about how there's no gatekeepers on Patreon, and Patreon's great and it can fund your creativity, and go Patreon, and they're trying to win back the mom and pop creators. But Patreon had to lay a bunch of people off this year too. This business model is not sustainable, and it's basically, you've got everybody begging for change in the subway, right? And at this point, you've got the musicians begging for money off of each other. If you don't have any money to give, and that's, you look at Kickstarter, other than, some of the huge Kickstarters, a lot of times it's just like somebody puts a campaign up and it's a handful of their diehard fans and then a bunch of like friends and whatever, and you're sort of like regifting, like, okay, fine, you back my Kickstarter, I'll back your Kickstarter when the time comes, and then you get stuck with like a bunch of books and crap that you really didn't want, but you felt obligated to do it because they backed your Kickstarter. Yeah, it's just a bunch of regifting. It's not actually getting products to consumers in a meaningful way, in my opinion. Indiegogo, I think, has been a little more successful in that regard. But it's going to be really interesting to watch. I think both Patreon and Kickstarter are going to implode here pretty soon. And Indiegogo, hopefully will learn from their mistakes. I really hope that Indiegogo is looking at Kickstarter, kind of the rise and fall, and looking at Patreon and looking at what not to do, because the same thing could happen to them if they decide they're going to start gatekeeping too. Hopefully that is not going to be the case. We'll see. I'm going to wrap this one up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk later. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.